Well, hey friends, anybody out there? Hi there. All right, we have functionality. I'm a little early. Wanted to make sure everything worked. So here we are. It also means I get to show off my fancy arachnologist masks. Isn't that nice? Spider mandibles hanging off down there. We'll take that off now. Oh, there we go. I'm all alone here. I don't need it. Yes, I'm very fashionable. So I spent yesterday out hunting spiders, found a few, found one place just north of here that it was just full of Argiope. So that was impressive. Let's see, what else am I up to? I gave my students a quiz and I have to sit down after this and start grading. Grading. One of my least favorite things about teaching is grading. If I had my way, I would just give them an A for showing up. I kind of feel like maybe that philosophy would get abused. Seven minutes. I started too early. What are we going to do for 7 minutes? F for fatal. Yeah, that would not be kind. Oh, let's see. So that I did another live stream with a group of Islamic people the other day. That wasn't very interesting, although it came out exactly as I expected. They came on strong, trying to argue that embryology shows that Islam is right and making lots of arguments for really weak arguments. So, for example, the one guy came on with this argument that, well, alcohol causes fetal alcohol syndrome and Islam forbids the consumption of alcohol. Therefore, Islam has saved millions of lives. It's such a weak kind of argument. Maybe it would work if you were one of those people who argue that Muslims aren't human and so don't take good care of themselves, or what did Shapiro say about Palestinians, that they live in sewage or some nonsense like that. But that's not how I feel about it at all. So people from every culture make the best they can. Oh, somebody asked, what is BSME? I'll be talking about that. Bill here repeatedly makes this argument. It's kind of silly. Yes, Darren has it right. Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. It's a good degree, sure. I I fully approve. I think having more people with engineering degrees is a good thing. Yeah, the title of the book is not at all promising. The title of the book, it tells you basically what's in it. And yeah, it's not great. Well, wave to Phoenix Marine too. Hi. So we're accumulating a few people here. Let's see, 4 more minutes. Let's see, another thing, I've been invited to another stream tomorrow evening talking about, let's see, who is it with? Who is it? Let me check this. Just checking my calendar. So Mama Atheist and Brain Bug. So the Brain Bug channel, and it says we're going to be talking about Western science denialism and the anti-intellectual movement as it pertains to your field of biology, and to Amanda's field of climate science, but other fields of science as well. So yeah, we're gonna talk a bit about science denialism stuff. Oh yeah, okay. All right, I flipped to that. Now I kind of lost track of where I am. Oh, okay, I can close that. I can close. I'm closing a few things here. Okay. Oh, we got that cat keeps showing up. Oh man, Rory cats. Trying to educate yourself, huh? Let's see who else. Okay. Kevin Logan isn't yet awake to feed. Wait, is he's over on the other side of the Atlantic. So it's he must be really sleeping in. Okay. So as I was saying, I'll be doing another live stream tomorrow with another couple of people. We'll be talking about, science denialism, which I'm going to come right out and say it's primarily a problem of the right. Yeah, we try to concede that, yeah, there are some loony lefties out there, but no. Yeah, so Joe, I believe embryology proved Islam if Muslims explained embryology 1300 years ago. Yeah, that's one of the things I talked about is when you look at the embryology in the Quran, it's just warmed over Aristotle and Galen, and there's nothing novel there. It's very simple and primitive. It's a one paragraph summary, and now they're telling us that testifies to the authority of Muhammad, which no, it doesn't. It just says that the authors of the Quran were people of the world. They were people who had a culture and were aware of this. Okay. Hey, look, it's 10 o'clock. I'm supposed to start talking about this book. Are you all ready? Let's see what this book is all about. So you can see I've got it up there. I've got it in my Kindle app, so I can just quickly skip through a few things. It's a strange book. It's kind of boring. I'm sorry to say. Yeah, when I proposed to do this, I thought, oh, this should be good for a laugh. But I got to tell you, the author is totally humorless, just really, really dreary, and we'll make the best of it that we can. Anyway, so the book is Debunking Darwinian Evolution, Global Warming, and Other Misconceptions. So apparently he thinks those are misconceptions. He does. And it's by a guy named William C. Chekol. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I hmm. Anyway, William Checkall, BSME, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. So I'm just going to call him Mr. BSME because I'm confident how to pronounce that. Yeah. So anyway, it's the truth concerning unconfirmed hypotheses that are being perpetuated as factual and how the scientific method is being abused. Now, I have a lot of respect for engineering, but I got to tell you that scientific method isn't what they learn in engineering. So let's dig into this book. I'm going to try and skim through pieces of it, and I'm also going to try to be brief, because if you look there at the top of that window, it's 152 pages long. That's too much. I don't want to talk for hours here about this book, especially since, as I said, it's kind of humorless. So here is the table of contents, and you can sort of see Checkall Matt. Okay, ha ha ha. Yeah, that's the could be. Anyway, so there's a table of contents. You can see chapter 1 is his introduction, and I'll say a bit about that. The introduction actually reveals some of this author's weird biases and his motivation for writing this book. And then he's going to tell us about significant errors in the theory of Darwinian evolution. I'll spend most of my time there. He's then going to tell us limitations on space travel and the laws of physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Great. Okay. I think there are limitations on all this stuff. I'm not going to say much about it. This would be a better one to have some physicist come on, or chemist or mathematician come on and point out his misconceptions. Then we got a section called Significant Errors in the Big Bang Theory, the Expanding Universe, and Macroevolution. And initially I was kind of interested in this, except it turns out it really doesn't say anything about macroevolution. The only thing it's really saying is, oh, you can't possibly determine how old the universe is. That radiometric dating doesn't work, is his claim here. Then unconfirmed earthly phenomenon and misguided beliefs. This one is that chapter is kind of interesting, although I'm not going to say much about it, because basically what he does in that chapter is confirm that he is a skeptic. He doesn't believe in UFOs. He doesn't believe in Bigfoot. There's a whole bunch of things like this. And I think that chapter means he ought to be quickly enlisted by CFI to work with them. Yeah, he meets the qualifications. Then we got fossil fuels. I'm going to skip over that one to say a little bit about chapter 8, why the Earth is unique among all planets within the cosmos. He apparently knows the nature of all planets within the cosmos, so he's going to tell us that no other planet could be anything like Earth. Yeah, this is one of those things that a lot of the creationists have adopted lately. And we got some conclusions, and conclusions are just going to reaffirm his introduction, where he exposes why he's a bit of a loon. Okay, so let's race through this. We don't want to spend all day going over this book together, right? If you want it, you can go find it on Google Books or something. Okay, so here's his claim in the preface. He says, pseudoscience is an erroneous belief in theories, hypotheses, and assumptions not based on the scientific method. Okay, sort of, okay. For instance, the almost universal belief in Darwinian evolution is now being taught in schools as actuality, when in fact it is no more than a poorly researched theory. All right. Yeah, that's kind of laying his cards on the table, isn't it? He thinks it's just a poorly researched theory. And he says, it's hard to say why these pseudoscientists are so adamant in basing everything in our universe on evolution. We don't. Okay. As we already mentioned, there's a bunch of physics and chemistry and math in this book, which is not based on the theory of evolution. So it's kind of a cell phone here. All right. So anyway, he's got some misconceptions about how science works. Now, this bit is a little bit interesting because what he says is many people that write books are articles that reject the Big Bang Theory, Darwinian evolution, or other mistaken beliefs do so for religious reasons. He's going to distance himself from religion. He's trying to argue that, that God has nothing to do with his ideas here. It's going to leak through in a few places, though. He really subscribes to some basic primitive creationist ideas, and that will be exposed. So many people believe this stuff. He says, okay, he's distancing himself. He's trying to set himself up as, oh, I'm not one of those. I'm a BSME, remember? So no, I'm going to use science here. The other thing that he gets into here is he's claiming, oh, the basis of his ideas are entirely in the scientific method. I get hints that he doesn't know what the scientific method is, though, because look here what he says. He's talking of the critics of his perspective. He says the foremost categories of scientists that this book is concerned with are the theoretical disciplines that spend considerable time in the laboratory attempting to understand scientific principles and refine existing theories. This is not good, he thinks. But that's exactly what the scientific method is, right? Is you go and do experiments in the lab or in nature. He kind of omits that. And we attempt to understand the scientific principles. This is all good scientific method stuff. What is his objection to all of that? It's just weird. And then he's going to go on and say, oh, there's a lot of nonsense is being fed to the public by pseudoscientists. And who are the pseudoscientists? It includes pseudo-engineers, pseudo-physicists, pseudo-mathematicians, among others, mostly those with PhDs who think that they know more than everyone else due to their advanced degrees. That's kind of amusing. This is a guy who puts his undergraduate degree in the author's name of his book. Mr. BSME is apparently very proud of having a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. Yeah, he should be. That's a good thing to do. But at the same time, somebody goes on and gets a PhD. Oh, that's apparently too much. Yeah, we're just going to have to. They're just wacko pseudoscientists if they've got a PhD. He does concede it's not true of all scientists and mathematicians, but unfortunately it's true for many of the most prominent and respected ones with the greatest influence on politicians, media, and the general public. I wish. Okay, so he's going to go on. He's going to rail a bit about, oh, those PhDs, and now they're no good. And then he's going to get into some half-baked philosophy, but we'll skip that. Let's go on to the stuff that I'm actually qualified to talk about, because darn it, I went and got a PhD in this. So he's got this whole chapter on significant errors in the theory of Darwinian evolution. The title is revealing. This is a really common strategy among creationists. And yes, I call him a creationist. He's not going to propose a better alternative hypothesis. Not at all. He's going to avoid that completely. Remember, he backed away from God. And as I said, it kind of leaks through that, yeah, he really is a godder here. So he can't possibly propose what he really thinks. So instead, he's going to focus on knocking holes, he imagines, in the theory of evolution. So he says it is quite evident today that natural selection has not eradicated all the unintelligent human beings that don't possess the least amount of common sense. Okay. There's a lot of irony here. Yeah, this could have been hilarious if he recognized his own absurdity, but no. Yeah, look, he's sitting here telling, oh, there's all these stupid people out there. So what kinds of things is he going to bring to bear on evolution? Well, he's just going to say it's impossible. It couldn't have happened repeatedly. So, for example, here we got this one little piece. So how did these first plants obtain the means to utilize photosynthesis? Apparently, in his mind, plants just emerged with all the machinery for photosynthesis, just poof, like that. So he doesn't seem to recognize that plants appeared later after algae and all these other things. There are bacteria that can carry out photosynthesis. That all this machinery evolved in prior forms, ancestral forms to plants. So the fact that plants can photosynthesize, why? Because they inherited from their ancestors. So he's just says it's a complex process, could not be solved in the time frame necessary for the newly formed plant to survive. What's the time frame? That's what I would ask. So we've got plants, but he seems to think they just emerged abruptly and they die if they didn't have photosynthesis. So they had to suddenly evolve photosynthesis. But at the same time, look at this next to it. The theory goes that all plant life can be traced back to one tiny alga that ingested cyanobacteria aeons ago and used photosynthesis to turn carbon dioxide and water into glucose and give off oxygen as a waste product. Why, yes, that photosynthesis evolved gradually over billions of years from other precursors. We can look at the machinery of photosynthesis and we can see that those enzymes were involved in all kinds of energy producing processes. So he's got it right there, but then he's still thinking, well, the plants must have just suddenly appeared. But he says, okay, transforming the entire atmosphere into one rich in oxygen. What total nonsense. Oh, darn, I am rebuked. He says it's total nonsense. Doesn't say how he knows it's total nonsense. He's not going to go into detail on any of this. It's just, boom, it's total nonsense. So I guess I'm done. I'm going to be teaching photosynthesis in my cell biology class in a couple of weeks. So I guess this makes it easy. Just stand up in class for one day and say, oh, that's total nonsense. We'll take a few weeks off. All right, but the next part, oh, this is juicy. All right. Unfortunately for evolutionists, there are life forms that exist on Earth today that cannot be convincingly placed on this imaginary tree of life. Now, this is where we're going to introduce data, arguments in favor of this thesis. So, for instance, penguins look a lot like birds, but obviously are not. For one thing, they are too heavy to fly. Yeah, digest this one for a moment. So by definition, they can't possibly be birds because they swim and they got flippers instead of wings. Doesn't matter that we look at their structure, we look at their physiology, look at their anatomy. Oh, we're all through. So penguins are not birds, which makes me wonder what they are. I guess they're just the penguin kind. He's not going to say. But this would be the place where, a reasonable author would have an alternative hypothesis besides just outright denial. Sorry, he doesn't. Okay. Let's see. He's now going to start tearing into all these authors in evolutionary biology. So he's got criticisms of Darwin. Of course he does. So he points out that Darwin consistently states in nearly every chapter, it seems to me, possibly, and I strongly suspect, yeah, that Darwin was proposing a hypothesis. He was tentative about some things. He was cautious in his wording. So this is not an objection. Read any scientific paper today, and it's one of the things I have to train my students into recognizing is, yeah, there's sometimes they're gonna take a very cautious approach. They think a little bit more strongly, but in print they'll be very careful in what they say. So this is his major criticism of Darwin. We'll come back to another criticism in a moment. Then he goes on to jump all over Steve Jones, who wrote a book called Darwin's Ghost. Darwin's Ghost, it's a fun book. He goes back and he tries to update Darwin and explain some of the more recent development. The book is 150 years old, all right? So yeah, there's been some updating in the last century and a half. Apparently, Mr. BSME disapproves of that kind of thing. But he's going to chew on poor Steve Jones. And look at his objection here. He uses big words and long sentences. Yeah, he used words such as ichneumonidae. That just means wasps. Okay, it's just a technical term for wasps. He mentions the osteodendrocheratic culture. That's actually a theory that's been discarded. Raymond Dart threw this one out. He argued that Australopithecines were using tools that you couldn't really detect, that they were using their teeth as a tool. Well, okay, that's not really a tool, but all right. It's a discarded hypothesis, basically. Axolotl. I love axolotls. Axolotls are adorable. These neotenic salamanders, right? So whoop-de-doo, he used the term axolotl. It's the name of the animal. What was he supposed to say? That squishy, long salamander-like thing with the gills. Okay, anyway, it's perfectly fine. Tucutuco is just the name of another animal. That's a South American rodent. So what was he supposed to say here? He's just using the name. Edentate just means toothless. So there's a whole group of mammals, the edentate mammals. And eft, it's the name of another animal. It's a newt. Okay. This is the silliest objection, that Steve Jones is smarter than Mr. BSME and used words that he doesn't know. If you're reading a science book and trying to learn new things, this is going to happen. You're going to get exposed to ideas and words and language and theories that you didn't know before. That's not a reason to think it's bad. Okay. Yeah, so he's addicted to the use of extremely long sentences, many more than 100 words. Holy moly. Yeah, he uses long sentences and long words. This is terrible. He also brings up ideas that he doesn't like. So he points out that Jones says that genes, like names, can be used to make guesses about the past. Yeah, that's true. You can use genes are, they're relics from the past. That you inherited those from your ancestors. So they're informative about past biology. Darwinism has a lot of explaining to do concerning repetitive DNA. I don't recall what Jones was saying here specifically, but I would kind of agree that Darwinism is an old version of evolutionary theory, and repetitive DNA does not get easily accommodated in Darwinism. That's why we use the modern evolutionary synthesis, because it can handle these kinds of concepts, because among other things, it's not exclusively about natural selection. Let's see, he says, in less than a century, the surface of the earth has been blurred so that the record of the past is almost lost, which is true. Fossils are rare. And we point this out over and over again. You can't expect a continuous fossil records. So, all right. Steve Jones admits that. It's true. Steve Jones additionally refers to dates in the past when certain events have supposedly occurred as if they are indeed facts, in many cases referring to events that transpired 300 million years ago or 500 million years ago. This is going to emerge periodically throughout this book. It's the Ken Ham approach to science. If somebody wasn't there to witness it, you can't say it happened. So if you're saying that things happened 300 million years ago, there's no way you can have evidence for that, because nobody was there and nobody was running a video recorder for the last 300 million years, so you could trace it back. That's, like I say, that's going to come up a few times, and it's kind of revealing. It's one of the things that tells me this guy is, underneath all his avoidance of creationist, outright literal creationist talk, he really is a creationist. He also says it will appear that Steve Jones is also blinded by a preconceived notion of the atheist's religion of evolution, without providing any new evidence of its validity. Yeah, okay. This is another common trope. Atheists have a religion. It's science and evolution. There's nothing religious about science. Oh, yeah. Okay. You're a very, very silly person, Mr. BSME. All right. Let's go on here. Oh, and so in light of the recent tremendous advances in genetics, again, I love this phrasing that the creationists use. He's saying, if you look at real science, if you look at what the geneticists are saying, and you look at what the biochemists are saying, and the molecular biologists, then it's impossible to evolve. So he's kind of, Mr. BSME, who's got a degree in mechanical engineering, telling me what genetics, biochemistry, and molecular biology say, and he's saying that it's something that's directly contradicted by those people. So no, that is incorrect. We have had tremendous advances in genetics. They do not contradict evolutionary theory. In fact, they tend to reinforce evolutionary theory. Okay, then we get into some fun details here. So he says scientists have only been able to decipher about 5% of the total DNA strand. What does he mean by decipher? We've got them, the code. Okay, we've got them all translated, so that's all there. And he says they declared the remaining 95% useless. How incredibly egotistical is that to believe that because they have not been smart enough to determine the reason for the majority of the DNA strand, that it does not have a purpose and is junk. This is false. That's not why we say it's junk. We say it's junk because it's highly variable between species. There's no correlation of the sequence of these regions with functional expression in the organism. We can do experiments like deleting it and we see no effect. We can also, look at the sequence of junk DNA and see that it is not functional for us. I mean, do we really need so many copies of reverse transcriptase, which is all entirely derived from viral infections? So, it's just nonsense to think that we've simply looked at it and said, oh, we don't understand this. So we throw up our hands and say it's junk. This is not the case. We say, this region is repetitive. It's packing peanuts or the equivalent thereof. Or this region is part of a viral genome that got inserted. So we know that it's not part of our functional, array of genes. There's a lot of things like this. And then he makes a really common canard here. He says this so-called junk DNA may not contain code for new proteins as in a regular gene. Some provide essential regulatory functions, features in the cell. And that is correct, but that's never been categorized as junk DNA. Yeah, we've known about regulatory DNA. Developmental biologists are really keen on regulatory DNA. We know all about this stuff. Well, not, I should rephrase that. We don't know all about the stuff, but we know quite a bit about how important regulatory DNA is. It's never been categorized as junk DNA. So this is just telling me this guy has never read any of this stuff for real. Okay. So we get into some other weird stuff. So no other animal has ever been able to build the complex structures of machines or communicate through written or spoken language as mankind. Man, although an animal in structure, is vastly superior to any other plant or animal in the organic community. Yeah, we're going to get a little anthropomorphism here, or anthropocentrism. This is part of his argument, is that we are totally unique and we are special. So, yeah. So he says, many scientists today believe that humans were created through evolutionary progression from earlier life forms. Yes, we do. We certainly do believe that. Hello, Neslik. Glad you could show up. The obvious, yeah, I should mention, he's got a few typos in his book, but it's actually not bad. It's pretty good for some independently written thing. Most of the language is okay. So I'll just praise it a little bit by saying, okay, yeah, it's competently written as far as the form goes, but the content is garbage. Okay, so he says the obvious flaw in this assumption comes from the fact that not only are there no credible records of intermediate species between any lower life forms and humans, but the immense difference between all varieties of animals and plants collectively in comparison to humans. That sentence doesn't quite hold together, but okay. So yeah, there are intermediate forms. We got lots of extant intermediate forms between various forms. We've got fossils that represent intermediate forms. So what's the basis of this objection? He doesn't have any evidence. He's just asserting there are no transitional fossils. Something we hear from creationists over and over again. And if you show them a transition between two forms, they will just say that doesn't count. Or they'll say, well, that just creates another gap. So now there's two gaps where there was just one, etc. Okay. Let's see, we're going to get into, oh yeah. So for evolution to occur, he's arguing that the first singular cell, the first life form would have to be not only self-sustaining, but capable of self-reproduction with only chemical nourishment. We can self-reproduce, well, with a partner, since we happen to be sexual species, but we can reproduce, and we're just consuming chemical nourishment. So what's the problem here? Okay, what it's saying is that the first things that we would call life forms, and this actually gets into a complicated issue because we have chemical reproduction, we have chemical replicators, and those transition imperceptibly into what we would actually call life. We don't have enough details about that to say, oh, here, this is where the boundary is. We can just draw a line right here. So Sorry, that's just not a good argument. Last I heard, the popular hypothesis was the RNA world. The RNA world is, yes, the RNA world is part of the story, but most of the people I know and talk to have gone to the metabolism first model. So we're not the first replicating forms were probably replicating metabolisms without RNA as an archive of information, but RNA was part of the soup inside the cell. That we had ribozymes that were carrying out various. It's complicated. Do I really want to get into abiogenesis here? But anyway, there's more to it than what Mr. BSME thinks. Yes, Boomer you points out using the word linear is a poor analogy. Yeah, it's because it wasn't linear. It was branching complex pattern of evolution. So he's just gone off here and more misconceptions. Where did the first chicken, hen, and rooster come from? He says this after he's just been explaining that chicken eggs are really, really complicated. Okay, yeah, there's all these pieces to the chicken egg. So where did the first chicken, hen, and rooster come from? Well, they came from a prior bird-like form. That eggs are deep in history. They've been around for ages. Reptiles have eggs, okay? So birds would have inherited it from their reptile ancestor. You didn't have to have the first chicken and hen appear and spontaneously and abruptly build the entire egg factory in their guts. That's just, he does this stuff over and over again. Yeah, so it's a lot like Ray Comfort, who does think that evolution happens to individuals, that you have to explain, for instance, how the first sexual organism was able to reproduce, because you had the first male and it had to sit around waiting for the first female to come along. No, they evolved together from ancestors who also had sexual reproduction. So yeah, it's goofy stuff. Oh, and here's a good one. This one I love to see, because this is standard creationist garbage. So he says the eye is another example of an extremely complex structure that could not have been created by chance. No one argues that it was created by chance. Even Charles Darwin stated in 1872 that to suppose the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. Creationists love that phrase. They quote this all over the place. What they don't quote is that then Darwin goes on in the rest of the chapter for many pages explaining exactly how it could have evolved by natural selection. So yeah, this is the standard traditional creationist quote mine. The only way you could possibly use this in an argument is if you were so ignorant and misinformed that you hadn't bothered to actually read the rest of the chapter that he's quote mining. Yeah, so this is what we're dealing with. Is again, I keep telling you, he denies it, but throughout he keeps revealing that he is classic creationist. This is just the same stuff that they always talk about. Oh, and this is another common creationist misconception. If a change in the environment is not major enough to threaten extinction, what is the incentive for a simple life form to make a crucial change in its ability to live in a foreign environment? These simple forms do not possess complex enough brains, if any, to make this kind of decision in the first place, deliberately or unconsciously. Yeah, they think that every step in our evolution was planned by your brain. So everything has to have been conscious. So it's a really silly argument. It tells us again where Mr. BSME is coming from, and that is he thinks evolution is something that happens to individuals. It happens intentionally throughout the history of the organism. Neither of those things are true. Furthermore, he's going to now tell us, okay, there are these things that all those evolutionists, they keep trotting out, they keep showing you these fossils. So he says all of those fossils are fictitious and a product of man's imagination. The Piltdown man, Nebraska man, Java man, Pekin man, Neanderthal man, the town child, Ramapithecus, Australopithecines, Lucy, and Ardipithecus have all been proven, you hear that, proven, to be hoaxes perpetuated by evolutionists in a frenzied attempt at proving their flawed theory. Aha. So here he's trotting at the end. Yeah, he starts off correct, right? Piltdown Man was a hoax. And we readily concede that it is definitely a hoax here. Nebraska Man was an exaggeration by a journalist. You know, there was this frenzy in the early part of the 20th century to find, oh, the human ancestor from your particular region, like Piltdown Man was really a product of British nationalism. And some Midwestern journalists, oh, we got to have our own Midwestern ancestor. So they found a pig's tooth and they claimed, oh, this is from Nebraska Man, etc. But the others are genuine. Nobody has called those, well, creationists have, but nobody responsible, intelligent, and educated has called these hoaxes. So Neanderthal is definitely not a hoax. Lucy, not a hoax. This is so he's going to go on. Let's see, the rest is, he's going to go on and on about this for a while, as creationists tend to do. So, for instance, Lucy's hands and feet are depicted by evolutionists as human-like. Well, yeah, because they were human-like. But no hand or foot. No, that's not true. We've found hand and foot bones from Australopithecines. So he doesn't really know anything about the fossil record. He's just announcing that it's all false. He doesn't have any good arguments here except outright denial. He's also going to talk about bees here. Oh, you know, there are plants that require bees to be pollinated. How could that happen? You know, the bees need the plants to eat, to live on. The plants need the bees to be pollinated. So how could those two possibly have originated? He's never heard of the idea of coevolution. That, you know, initially you've got an ancient bee and you've got an ancient plant that don't require each other, but hey, pollen's tasty, nectar's tasty. Oh, sure, it's great that we're getting our pollen sown a little further because we got insect pollinators, and it's only gradually over time that they acquire greater and greater dependency on each other, until now they require this is a required interaction to keep them alive. So whoop-de-doo. Oh, and you knew this had to be coming. Second law of thermodynamics argument. Okay. Yeah, so according to the second law of thermodynamics, entropy always increases in a closed system. This is true. Now, the question is Earth a closed system? And no, it is not. The Earth is depending on this giant ball of nuclear reactions going on in the sky, radiating energy onto the planet. So, okay. Yeah. You would think somebody with an engineering degree would understand this principle of entropy and not misuse it so grossly. All right. Oh, and now this is the fun bit. This is where we get some more self-referential irony. He's going to rail against the American population because they're so darn stupid. Would you believe in a survey of over 2,000 people conducted as recently as 2012, 26% of Americans were not aware that the Earth orbits the sun? Oh, yeah. How stupid are those people? There are people that still believe that the Earth is flat, and they have their own organization known as the Flat Earth Society. Oh, I agree. That is ridiculous. The evidence is so strong for a globular Earth, for the Earth rotating or orbiting around the sun, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that there's a bunch of people who believe in very stupid things. Would you believe that there are even people who think evolution is false? Those guys, oh man. Oh, yes, Darren Simmons points out about entropy. It's a mistake to say it always increases, rather it never decreases. Yeah, we can have all kinds of chance events that cause transient fluctuations, but all right. So he says, it's no wonder it's so easy to dupe the public into believing these untruths. Well, hey, if they believe that the earth is flat, then how easy is it to make them believe in evolution? Except, something like, what is it? Something around close to 40%, between 40 and 50% don't believe in evolution. Therefore, we could turn the same argument around against him. Yeah. All right, there's a couple chapters here I'm going to skip over. So limitations in space travel and the laws of physics, chemistry, and mathematics. Any mathematicians, physicists want to get into this? Yeah, it's speed of light limitations, etc. He's going to also complain that we believe in this Star Trek stuff, and Star Trek is entertainment. I'm sorry to say, it's not good physics. In fact, it's kind of silly physics. Yeah, so let me just skim through this again because I don't want to sit here all day. Yeah, he's going to talk about the nature of time and energy. Oh, yeah, okay, just forget it. Something as basic as simple as evolution, which everybody understands, right? You'd have to be an idiot to disagree with evolution, and he disagrees with that, and yet he's going to tell us about all that really hard stuff like physics. Okay. Next, he's going to tell, this was such a disappointment to me. So you're talking about significant errors in the Big Bang Theory, the expanding universe, and macroevolution. He really doesn't have anything to talk about here. The key of his argument here is that he doesn't believe that radiometric dating works. So all that stuff that says the universe is old, that says the earth is old, no, you can't do that because there's an inherent flaw in this method since no one was present to measure the radioactive elements of a rock when it was formed. Okay. Actually, this isn't entirely true because there are rocks, that where we can see when the rock formed and we can measure the radiation in it. So we can use that as part of a baseline. There's all kinds of other things here where we can do this. But the main thing is that we have a theoretical foundation for how radiometric dating would work. We've got a multitude of mechanisms, different radioisotopes that we can measure their decay rates. And we can plot those decay rates and see where they intersect. We can actually pull this together. We didn't need somebody there to witness the formation of these elements. We know their properties, so we can reasonably infer backwards to figure out how things actually worked. Yeah, so yeah, this is just a bad argument. Uh, and then he says, regardless of whom you believe, nearly everybody agrees that at most humans have inhabited the earth for only a few thousand to tens of thousands of years. Uh, we we don't. Okay. Yes, the rocks were there. Okay, and we can pull out the rocks. We can study the rocks and see. We can learn all kinds of things from the rocks. Anyway, so now he's making this claim that all everybody agrees the Earth is only a few, humans are only a few thousand to tens of thousands of years old. No, that's not true. The consensus is that Homo sapiens has been around roughly 200,000 years. So we don't agree about that. Um, we actually think it's much older than that. Furthermore, he then goes on. We have history and can prove what happened only during this relatively short period of time in which events were recorded. And are you going to be astounded at this? About 6,000 years. How? Where did that 6,000 years come from? He says anything pertaining to events prior to that is pure speculation. There is no possible evidence because humans have only been around for 6,000 years. Uh-huh. See, this is another one of those little clues that tells me this is a guy who doesn't read the biology literature, doesn't read about evolution. He only reads the creationist literature, and this is the kind of nonsense he comes up with. Yeah, humanity is closer to 200,000 years old. It's not 6,000 years. The only people who argue for 6,000 years are creationists. And worse than that, biblical creationists. You know, there are creationists who argue that for an old earth. So this is a very narrow scope that he's dealing with here, a narrow range of creationists, and he's wrong. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of exposing all this stuff. And here we go again. We have history. We can prove what happened only during this period of time. No, we have again the Ken Ham strategy is bogus. It doesn't work. He just wants to say if there wasn't a human there to witness it and write it down in some ancient text, like a Bible or something, uh, you can't claim it, and this is false. And this is also interesting. Scientific facts indicate that the truth may in reality be situated somewhere in between the two extremes of 6,000 years and 15 billion years. Have we heard that before? Yeah, the golden mean fallacy. No, why don't I just argue? Well, no, my argument is that the universe is 20 trillion years old, and so the truth must lie somewhere in the middle, around 10 trillion years, right? No, that argument doesn't work. It's bogus. Okay, moving on to the next chapter. Um, this one, unconfirmed earthly phenomena, and that should have been phenomena, but okay, and misguided beliefs. This one is pure skepticism, classical skepticism. He's going to argue that no, there are no UFOs. UFOs are very silly. Bigfoot is very silly. He's going to dig into, let's see what else. I think I just skimmed over most of this. Yeah. So he's just going to dismiss a whole lot of ideas. Oh, Dippy says 20 trillion years, like L. Ron Hubbard's Thetans and Zeno. Oh, is that what he says? 20 trillion years? Oh no, I subconsciously channeled L. Ron Hubbard. Thanks for that. You're that, or maybe I had some amazing insight from some body thetan somewhere inhabiting. No, it's garbage. Okay. So anyway, he's basically arguing for the clinical skepticism. It's just more garbage. But it does go to show that a lot of skeptical beliefs would fit in perfectly with people like this, being selective in what you're going to be skeptical about. Let's see. Oh, then the global warming hoax. Yeah, we could spend a good hour or two just talking about this. I don't wanna. Uh, he's arguing that global warming is not true. It doesn't happen. That humans only contribute an insignificant amount of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. He's concedes that, yeah, humans produce carbon dioxide, but he says such a tiny amount. He doesn't seem to recognize that what we're looking at is a difference, that we're looking at a system in balance and we're shoving it out of balance. And you don't need to throw, tremendous amounts of carbon all at once into the atmosphere to throw it out of balance. If you've got a steady production of small quantities of CO2 greater than the amount that can be easily sequestered, then you will get net increase and you'll get an increase in temperature. His argument here, oh, this is familiar too. Governments literally spend billions of dollars on grants to scientists to prove that humans are causing global warming on an unprecedented scale. If they tell the truth and deny that this is the case, they are out of a job, so they lie and falsify results. Billions of dollars. Yeah, I've gotten rich as a scientist. Do I know anybody who's gotten rich as a scientist? No, I don't. Yeah, I mean, there's a few that go into industry that do really, really well. But not federally funded research. That's relatively small sums of money. Okay. Yeah, so we're all lying to keep our cushy jobs. I'm a lower middle class person. Main virtue of my jobs, I've got some stability in my income, which I wouldn't have if otherwise, because here I'm looking at spiders and things like that. Who would pay me to do that? Not industry, that's for sure. So it's kind of a silly argument. I like what I do. That's why I do it. It's not because I'm making large sums of money at this and that I need to falsify results. Actually, the quickest way to get thrown out of academic research is to start falsifying results. There are many names that demonstrate that. Oh, here's another one. He's got a thing about Bill Nye. Mr. BSME is going to point out that Bill Nye has a BSME degree. Oh my God. So he goes on, he says, okay, he's got a mechanical engineering background and he's highly regarded by some as a scientific educator because, yeah, he's pretty good at educating. Since he's taught basic science to grade school students on TV, which requires only a rudimentary knowledge of basic physics, but not climatology. That's really amusing. His authority comes from his BSME degree, yet he admits right here, yeah, having a BSME degree does not qualify you in climatology. Maybe we should listen to those people with climatology degrees. He says that Bill Nye is highly opinionated on evolution, the Big Bang Theory, and global climate change without going into the details. as to why he holds such an adamant opinion on his beliefs or offering any scientific backup. Wow, the irony is strong in this one. Throughout this book, he does not, Mr. BSME here, does not offer any scientific backing for his ideas. He's just going to sit there and say, oh, no, this is not true. You can't believe this. You can't trust these guys because they're getting paid fortunes by who funds climatology research anyway? You know, the coal companies, the oil companies, they're not the ones chucking lots of money at scientists to demonstrate this stuff. So yeah, so it's a weird thing because he's simultaneously trying to argue that having a BSME does not qualify you to opine on all of these subjects. Yet this is an entire book written by a guy with a BSME trying to opine in contradiction to the scientific consensus on all of these ideas. Yeah, so he really resents Bill Nye here. Okay, then here's another chapter I'm going to skip. This is fossil fuels versus renewable energy sources. You know, and some of it's right that they're, you know, it's hard to get enough energy from renewable sources, which apparently means we shouldn't try. Yeah, okay. Let's see. Boomer uses Bill should have called it. Oops, that's scrolled by. Should have called engineering. We put science into industry and taught skilled trades to go forth and robot. You know, that's a really good point. That this is one of the things I have problems with, is that that we educate people and yet at the same time we disrespect things like engineering and trade school and all that kind of thing. And you know, right at the very beginning of this, I tried to make the point that getting a BSME, good for you. You should be proud of that. So there's lots of good engineering, and nothing I am saying here is to disrespect engineering or math or working in trades or doing practical things. You know, my father was an automobile mechanic and I had great pride in what he did. So, you know, this is, it's setting up a bad dichotomy for us to try and pretend that um, the so-called theoretical sciences, what I do is not particularly theoretical, is somehow inferior or superior to applied science. We need them both. Let's keep doing both. So, you know, this is just stuff that's not a good argument. Okay, next chapter. Why the Earth is unique among all planets within the cosmos. He is going to do a bad job here. He really doesn't have any good arguments in here that to argue for the, you know, the unique Earth hypothesis. So he's gonna argue things like, okay, if the Earth were only a few million miles closer to the sun, the surface of the Earth would become considerably warmer. It might. There are multiple factors that play a role in the temperature of the planet, right? So we've got greenhouse effects, we've got albedo, we've got all these other things that affect the precise temperature of the planet, and they're, you know, how much of the Earth is covered with ice. Yeah, so there's all this stuff here. Yet he wants to argue that a variation of only a few million years. This is also false because the Earth's proximity to the sun varies by, yes, as Darren Simmons points out, by several billion kilometers over the course of a year. It doesn't become uninhabitable when it's farther away. In fact, the Northern Hemisphere, you know, we're getting ready for winter here. We're actually going to, you know, the Northern Hemisphere, the planet as a whole is actually going to get closer to the sun in the next short period of time. But what's most significant is the axial tilt. So we're going to be tilted away from the sun. So we're going to get colder here. So this is simply false. Uh, we've got a wide range over which planets can sit in, the Goldilocks zone around their star. So saying that there is this range means, yeah, it doesn't exclude the possibility that some other planet far, far away around another star is also sitting in its Goldilocks zone that also has these properties. Nothing that this guy writes about is at all contradicting the idea that other worlds could have similar situations. He just doesn't like the idea. So he points out these kinds of books. The Earth is the only known planet with huge bodies of liquid water that are vital for life to exist as we know it. Okay, that's true for the solar system. No other planet orbiting our sun has huge bodies of liquid water. So what? That doesn't mean that other planets around other stars couldn't have huge bodies of liquid water. So, remember the title of this chapter is Earth is unique among all planets within the cosmos. He's not demonstrating that. He can't. All right. Let's go on from this. He's making bad arguments again. Chapter 9 is a rehash. It's kind of a peculiar thing about, I said that this book was reasonably competently written as far as the form goes, but the content is just this mess. He keeps returning to evolution. It's embedded in several chapters here where he's got little fragments of the argument, and he's going to repeat his arguments over and over again. This really needed a competent editor. Okay, Astro Steve points out Titan has liquid methane or ethane. Sure. So I'd really be interested to see if there's any version of life out there around Titan. Maybe there is. It wouldn't be life like what we find here on Earth, but okay. This whole argument from uniqueness just doesn't hold up. All right, so here we go. Evolution versus creationism. Here's another silly claim. Evolutionists claim that humans have been on Earth for over 1 million years. No, we don't. Didn't we go over this earlier? Homo sapiens has been around for about 200,000 years. Okay. Yeah, I would go with that. 100,000, 200,000 years in that ballpark. So we haven't been claiming that humans have been here for over 1 million years. But this is just part of his stupid argument that written historical records concur with a biblical explanation and only go back a few thousand years. Yeah, let's get back to the Bible. He said this before. Okay, written records only go back 6,000 years, he said. Therefore, but what he wants to argue in this chapter, without actually coming out and endorsing young Earth creationism, is to point out that Judaism, Christianity, and Islamic religions all acknowledge the Old Testament is the word of the same God. So, once again, we're looking at the history of these religions. They're related religions, sure. They all link together. So pointing that fact out does not offer any evidence that they have the sole access to the truth. All right, we're going to get into more of this. DNA code is self-replicating and self-correcting. Yeah, DNA is complicated stuff. We have evolved a great multitude of enzymes to ensure error correction and fidelity of replication. Can anyone explain how this could happen purely by chance? Well, no, it's not purely by chance, first of all, regardless of the time available. Yeah, it's called natural selection. Natural selection is not purely by chance. And the amount of time it required to evolve mechanisms for accurate replication of DNA is, we're talking hundreds of million years. So whoop-de-doo again. If the simplest life form cannot materialize by chance alone, is that his hypothesis? If the simplest life form cannot materialize by chance alone, there is a much greater probability that life was created by a far superior intelligence than man has ever possessed. Yeah, we're back on the intelligent design game here. This is a bogus argument. Nobody argues that the simplest life forms emerged by chance alone, let alone that they materialized by chance alone. And this has nothing to do with whether intelligent design is correct. The fact that we have these complex intermediate steps that we can track, yeah, that's the evidence that life evolved. That we can look at the genomes of diverse organisms and we can see the similarities. That shows that we evolved from a common ancestor. So, yeah. Then we're going to get into some wacky stuff. There are literally thousands of cases of near-death experiences witnessed over a period of thousands of years that seem to provide a glimpse of an afterlife in a spirit world. Okay, let's all back away from this one. So yeah, the evidence from NDEs. Oh, but he's going to get worse. Belief in a supreme being has thousands of years of history on its side. Science does not. Yes, so NDEs, people have believed in gods for longer than they have in science. These are supposed to be arguments for intelligent design, I guess. Anyway, okay, yeah, you get the idea. This is a book by a closet creationist who has no arguments for an alternative, and just spends the entire 152 pages knocking on evolutionary theory. Yes, NDEs cannot be explained scientifically. They can be explained psychologically. We don't need an afterlife to explain how organisms work. So let's get to his conclusions. The conclusions. His conclusions, he rehashes a lot of what he said before, but really what we discover in his summary is that this is a book of resentments. So he says there are many categories of pseudoscientists. Didn't he say this in the beginning? Yeah, there are categories of pseudoscientists that come with terms such as theoretical, astro, astronomy. I guess that's a pseudoscience now. Cosmo or evolutionary that does not deal with real science at all, or only with conjecture, such as theoretical physicist, theoretical biologist, astrophysicist, cosmologist, or evolutionary biologist. Yeah, he really doesn't like all these smarty pants people who have more advanced degrees than he does, that have thought long and hard and proposed internally consistent, detailed models for how the universe works. Yeah, he doesn't like that at all. That's really what this book is somebody with a bachelor's degree in an inferiority complex. He shouldn't, but he has one, that just resents the fact that there are these people who claim that a theory is correct just because he has an advanced degree or a high IQ. this shouldn't happen. I agree. There are some people who take this kind of attitude. But no, having a higher IQ or having an advanced degree does not make you right. You have to do the science. And the stuff that we're talking about here, the stuff that Mr. BSME doesn't believe, are solid stories that have a foundation in evidence and experiment. Okay, so yeah, this is just, yeah, so he says the majority of people with or without advanced degrees and or high IQs base their judgment concerning a particular hypothesis not on a thorough evaluation of the entire premise for the original theory, but only on a few, or in many cases, only a single detail. Oh, self-referential irony again. Now think back to where he's criticizing Darwin's argument about the evolution of the eye, where he says that, Darwin comes out and says, it seems absurd to think that the eye could have evolved by natural selection. And Mr. BSME here pulls out that one sentence, not a thorough analysis of the hypothesis, but on just one single detail, this sentence that he pulled out of The Origin of Species. That's it. That's all he's got. And yet he goes on and writes this 152-page book where he's trying to argue that, yeah. And he concludes with this. It's unfortunate so many people in positions of authority or influence are set on economic or political gain. So yeah, evolutionary biologists, economic gain. No, trust me, if you're out there thinking you want to go into evolutionary theory and study evolutionary biology and all that kind of stuff, don't do it because you think you're going to get economic gain out of it. You're not. Or fame. No, you're not going to get fame either. And these people deliberately mislead others into believing falsehoods to satisfy their own personal arrogance or greed. Speaking of personal arrogance, Mr. BSME is arrogantly throwing out evolutionary theory, cosmology, Big Bang, fundamental physics just gets disregarded because this guy thinks he knows it all. Now that's arrogance. Don't tell me about arrogance. The reason I didn't go into his chapters on physics is because I do have some humility. I don't know physics all that well. I know the basics. I know physics to a degree of an undergraduate physics person, but that's about it. So, I've got my own humility that he lacks, and I'm not going to charge in there and say, yeah, I know physics better than you. Then he says, okay, until these dishonest scientists, mathematicians, educators, politicians, and media choose to tell the truth as Mr. BSME knows it, the majority of people on Earth will be duped into believing these deceptions. Regrettably, this will in all probability not come to pass anytime soon, since the majority of politicians, media, and teachers worldwide continue to perpetuate these myths. Oh, if only they read Mr. BSME's book and they could see through the error of their ways. Oh, yeah, it's just... Anyway, okay, that's enough. I've gone through this entire horrible book. Does he have it? Yeah, oh, he's got references. Oh, this was interesting. Take a look at his references. Yeah, so Bible Life Ministries is one of his sources. I don't know the geology references either, so don't ask me. The BBC, okay. Creation Moments radio scripts. The Big Bang is just religion disguised as science. Yeah, another mysterious source. Let's see, Taking Back Astronomy. Oh, Dr. Jason Lisle. Yeah, creationist there. That's a good source. The Holy Scriptures examined. Never mind. Translation of the Quran. Okay. Oh, this could have, prove evolution is false, even without the Bible. Yeah, he didn't do that. How fossils work. That's not a source. Wait. How fossils work. So we got a name here, but that's not a source. That I couldn't look that up. Yeah. Oh, Andrew Snelling. Oh boy. Biblical evidence for long creation days. Okay. Eternal publications. Well, they're still around, I'm sure. Let's see. Answers in Genesis, Wikipedia. Oh, here's finally a credible source. Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, but of course the Origin of Species is really old, and you don't see it getting cited very much in the scientific literature anymore. It's a historical source. The real change of, I wonder what that is. Oh, the sun is causing a 30-year-old cold spell. Yeah, we're just getting, just looking through his references, you can get a good idea that it's garbage. Oh, except there's Ethan Siegel. Ethan Siegel's good. I like Ethan's work. I doubt that Mr. BSME absorbed anything that Ethan would have said. Quora.com, great, okay. Science Daily, no, that's not a good source. Oh, the Illuminati conspiracy. I needed to know that. Let's see, what do we got here? Oh, the New York Times. I don't trust the New York Times myself, but okay. Yeah, you get the idea. So we've got a bunch of half-baked sources with little discrimination by the author in the quality of the work. We're quoting a lot of creationists, Answers in Genesis, Jason Lisle, etc. Yeah. So I think we can safely say this is not a good book. And yeah, there's just so much garbage in this. So I think we'll leave it there. Oh yeah, harp to, yeah, it's a really weird set of references here. Okay, here's about the author that we need to know that. He's a retired mechanical engineer. So he's an old guy. He has a credibility that requires a scientific background consisting of a BSME. Great, although apparently Bill Nye, who also has a mechanical engineering degree, is not adequate. Oh, now we're going to hear about how wonderful a BSME is. It applies the principles of engineering, physics, and material science. Yeah, okay, good. And they all have a degree or a minor in mathematics. All right, yeah, you got to know your math to be a mechanical engineer. All right, so he's got sort of this minimal basic understanding of engineering and mathematics. Too bad he doesn't really understand the science he's talking about. And oh yeah, his little end plate here. Yeah, the public is being duped. Enough. Okay. Anyway, so it was kind of interesting in some ways because he's not relying on the God arguments here, but as you read through it, you get clear understanding that it really is based on creationist articles and creationist arguments. So that he says it's not doesn't mean that it isn't. The other thing I got from this book is how much the politics of resentment is fueling this. That Mr. BSME is really kind of pissed off at people who know better than he about science, who've got more advanced degrees than he does. And, perhaps he has experienced some ill-formed, bad commentary against his particular branch of engineering. I will agree that happens. I've seen it. That people who disparage trade work or trade school or engineering degrees totally inappropriately. And I can see where some people could be acquiring some resentment against that. But again, that's the entire basis of his argument. This is why he believes this stuff, is because he wants to own the academic scientists. That's the entire foundation of his argument, and it's a really bad sort of argument. It's like owning the libtards, and it makes me wonder what his political foundation is. He's probably a religious creationist. He is probably, just guessing, Republican. Um, this is the kind of guy who would vote for Trump just to get back at all those other people. And terrible reason to go into science. So, anybody have any other comments before I let us all go here? Anyone want to say anything in the comments? I'm reading them right now. Yeah, you're pointing out some of the things I mentioned, that there's a lot of garbage sources here. Okay. Well, then I will let you all go. I'm going to figure out how to terminate this. Has there ever been a creationist that has changed their mind that you have encountered? Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, there have been. There have been people who've come to my talks and who've met me and who've mentioned that, yeah, a long time ago they kind of accepted this stuff, but they got better. So it does happen. One of the problems here is how do we convince those people? And I don't think dumping a huge volume of information on them works, because as we see with this guy, he's driven not by the science, but his personal disagreements and his resentment of the implications of that science. That what we have here are people who don't want to consider the possibility that the universe isn't designed specifically for them. So there's this anthropocentric view that, that we've decentered the universe from humanity, is something they don't like at all. Who resent the fact that some of the things we're talking about requires a greater comprehension of fundamental science to see the point, and that makes it hard for them. They're not stupid. I don't think this guy is really stupid, but he's committed to a worldview, and that worldview does not allow for the conclusions that science has reached. So he's angry about it. He wants to show that we are wrong, but he doesn't really have the tools to do this. Yeah, so Diane Bruce points out, he was probably at a local research facility. Or actually, I didn't get into it, but there's a whole long section in here where he rants and raves about people who don't do applied science. So he was working at an engineering facility somewhere, not a research facility. And yeah, he doesn't think that people who do in-depth experimentation and observation of phenomena he's unfamiliar with are doing science. The only science that counts are science where you might be doing calculations, but they're entirely applied engineering calculations. Yeah. Oh, Joe was waiting for him to show up in the Oh, I don't think he will. He's an old retired engineer, and I don't think he thinks about this stuff that much anymore. So sorry, I don't expect him to show up. We'll see. Maybe he'll show up in the comments on the YouTube channel later. Of course, he would have to figure out YouTube, and that's so theoretical. It's not at all applied. So yeah, maybe not. Okay, well, I'm gonna let us go here because how long have I been? I've been talking for about an hour and a half. That's too long. Oh no, another question. You're never gonna let me go. What influence do you think philosophers of science have towards changing the mind of creationists? I find they don't have the technical knowledge but can communicate effectively. Oh, that is a good point. That uh, being deeply steeped in the details of evolutionary biology, for instance, doesn't make you a great communicator. That's a whole nother skill there. And we need good communicators to get this across. So, there's a lot of people I respect who have a great deal more technical knowledge than I have, but don't get deeply into the communication side of it, and that makes their ability to influence people very limited. There are people out there who are really good at the communication side and the science side. I'd say that Lenski, for example, is a great guy for doing the research, groundbreaking research, and also communicating that information to the public at large. I greatly appreciate that. And that this is going to sound a little disparaging, but it's not intended that way. Um, that there are people like Joe Felsenstein, who is, light years more smart than I am, who knows so much, and who also does a good job of communicating. But I think he easily gets into the weeds. A lot of his stuff is amazing work, and it's very, very mathematical and very technical. And when he tones it down, he's great in the general public. When he cranks it up to 11, I can deeply appreciate that, but I can also see where a lot of people would be lost by it. Uh, so there's this range of abilities that we all have to exercise in order to get the information out there. Okay, and yeah, this has been an hour and a half. That's a long time. So I'm really gonna break it off here. Thanks for listening. And I'm gonna end the stream, and we'll talk to you again next week. So remember, this Bad Science Sunday is something I'm trying to do every Sunday. So we'll do something different next week. Leave me a comment if you have suggestions. And good day all. Go have fun. Go do something fun, like grade papers. We'll talk to you all later.